Chosen one, lock your attention on this message right now, that restlessness you have been carrying, the one that feels like anticipation but you cannot name it. Stop pushing it away. The enemy has been working overtime this week for one reason and one reason only. He knows who is about to walk through your door. It all shifts in the next 24 hours. The waiting, the confusion, the silence from people you thought were coming. But hear me clearly, this is not ending because of luck. It is ending because of who you have become. Think back to that moment this week when you almost settled, when you almost said yes to something smaller just to make the pressure stop. You did not know it then, but that refusal was a declaration. That moment of restraint was the act that made room for what heaven has been preparing to send you. You did not shrink your destiny, you protected it. Something significant has been redirected toward you, and God pulled you to this message today to make sure you were prepared to receive it. You did not find this recording by accident. The algorithm did not bring you here. The Holy Spirit did. This is a divine appointment scheduled before the foundations of the earth. You are standing at a threshold, and on the other side of it is someone powerful who has already chosen you. Do not click away. Your future self is begging you to stay, because if you leave now, you will walk into that moment unprepared, and the enemy is counting on your distraction. I know what the last 72 hours have felt like. The atmosphere has not just been quiet, it has been loaded, like something is pressing against a door from the other side, and you can feel the pressure but you cannot see the source. Maybe you have been second-guessing yourself this week, replaying conversations, wondering if you said too much or gave too little. Or maybe you woke up at 3 in the morning and could not go back to sleep, and in that silence you felt something stirring in your spirit that you could not explain. Perhaps you have been watching people around you receive news, receive calls, receive opportunities, and somewhere in your chest you have been asking God, when is it my turn? You feel suspended, like you are standing in a hallway between the chapter that just closed and the one that has not opened yet. And in that hallway, the enemy has been whispering a very specific lie. Listen to your thoughts. He has been telling you that the silence means rejection. He has been replaying every mistake you made this season and telling you that because of those moments, that moment when you walked away from the wrong situation, that moment when you stopped performing for people who were not even in your corner, that moment when you chose your peace over proving yourself, he is telling you that those were failures. He is telling you that you disqualified yourself and the offer went to someone else. But I need you to hear what the scripture actually says about this moment. Isaiah 45:33 says, I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name. Listen to that promise, summoned by name, not by performance, not by perfection, by name. The Most High did not select you because your record was clean. He selected you because your name was already written on the assignment. The enemy cannot reassign what God has already labeled. The offer that is coming to you was never for someone else. It was sealed with your name before you were born. The heaviness you feel is not the weight of being overlooked. It is the weight of something significant approaching. It is the pressure that comes right before a door opens, the moment the atmosphere shifts, because what has been traveling toward you has finally arrived. You think that moment when you stepped back, when you refused to chase, when you stayed still even though everything in you wanted to move, you think that was weakness. Let me reframe your reality right now. That was not weakness, that was positioning. You were not standing still. You were being planted exactly where the powerful one coming toward you would be able to find you. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you the 3 signs that confirm someone powerful has already chosen you before you even know their name. I am going to walk you through the spiritual audit that reveals why the silence of this season was not rejection but preparation. And at the end, I am going to release a declaration over your life that seals the assignment and opens the door for what has been waiting to reach you. Stay until the very last second. What is coming to you is too significant to miss because you left early, and that weight you've been carrying, that strange, unexplainable sense that something is shifting beneath the surface of your life, that isn't anxiety, that isn't fear, That is the trembling of a door about to open, the kind of door that doesn't knock twice. But before you receive what's coming, there's something you need to understand, something hidden in plain sight that most people miss entirely. And missing it is exactly why so many people stand at the edge of their breakthrough and walk away from it. Some messages don't just inform, they activate. If something stirred deep in your spirit just now, you may be ready to receive the Chosen One's blueprint. This sacred guide reveals the 8 divine patterns behind your calling, your suffering, and your destiny. It also comes with the full audiobook, so you can absorb it during prayer, rest, or quiet moments with God. And for those called to speak His truth, you'll also receive Activating Your Prophet Mantle, a powerful bonus ebook for those carrying a prophetic assignment. The link is in the first pinned comment, but only for a limited time. Now hear this. The reason most people don't recognize a divine encounter when it arrives is because they've been conditioned to expect God to show up in grandeur, in the burning bush, in the parting sea, in the thunderclap. We have been raised on the spectacular. We have been formed by the idea that if God is truly moving, the sky should split, the ground should shake, and every eye in the room should witness it simultaneously. And so we wait for the dramatic. We wait for the undeniable. We wait for a sign so large and so obvious that even our doubting mind can't argue with it. But the tragedy of that expectation is that it has trained us to be deaf to the very frequency on which heaven most often speaks. Scripture tells us that when Elijah was at his most broken, when he had run so far from his purpose that he collapsed under a broom tree and asked God to take his life, the Most High didn't answer with fire. He answered with a still small voice, and before the voice came, an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." Not the journey behind you, the journey ahead. God wasn't acknowledging Elijah's exhaustion to dismiss him. He was acknowledging it because what was coming required him whole. Let that land for a moment. This was a man who had just called down fire from heaven on Mount Carmel, a man who had stood before the prophets of Baal in the most spectacular display of divine power the ancient world had ever witnessed, a man who had run with supernatural strength ahead of the chariot of a king. And yet here he was, underneath a small desert shrub, asking to die, not because he was weak, but because the magnitude of what he had been carrying had finally caught up with him in the silence that followed the storm. And God did not rebuke him. God did not remind him of what he had just accomplished. God sent an angel to touch him, to feed him, to let him sleep again. Because the Most High understood something that Elijah could not see from the floor of his despair, that there was still Elisha waiting to be found, still a small voice waiting to be heard on the mountain, still a mantle that would need to be passed. The story wasn't over. In fact, the most sacred part of it hadn't even begun yet, and this is where it goes deeper than most people are willing to go. You've been interpreting your exhaustion as evidence that God has forgotten you. You've been reading the silence as absence. You've been confusing the calm before the movement with the stillness of abandonment. But what if your exhaustion is actually the signal that you're standing at the exact threshold where something massive is about to be handed to you? What if the reason your body feels heavy and your spirit feels stretched and your mind can't stop cycling through the same questions is not because you are failing, but because you are being prepared? What if the enemy has been working so hard to keep you tired, confused, and doubting yourself precisely because he can see what you can't see? What's standing just on the other side of this moment? Because here's what most people never realize. The spiritual attacks don't intensify when you're far from your purpose. They intensify when you're close. Think about that with every ounce of honest reflection you can muster. A lion doesn't waste energy chasing prey it doesn't want. A storm doesn't gather over an empty field with nothing to uproot. The warfare around your life is not random. It is targeted, it is specific, it is personal. And targeted warfare is actually a form of confirmation. It means something in you is worth the enemy's attention. It means something in you is worth the fight. And if you can shift your perspective even slightly, from victim of the attack to carrier of something the darkness cannot afford to let loose, everything about how you see this season will change. The intensity of the opposition is actually a prophetic indicator. It is heaven's way of saying you are near enough to matter. You are close enough to threaten. You are positioned well enough that the adversary has had to mobilize. And if that is true, and it is, then the exhaustion you feel right now is not the end of the story. It is the last desperate push of a resistance that already knows it is losing. But this leads us to something that cuts even deeper, and what's coming next will likely surprise you, because it always does. You've been waiting for someone powerful to arrive in your life. You've prayed for it, fasted for it, believed for it. You've written it in journals at 2 in the morning. You stood at altars and laid it at God's feet. You've rehearsed what it would look like, imagined what it would feel like, tried to stay ready for it in every season. And yet every time something significant began to form, every time a connection deepened, an opportunity opened, or a door appeared, something happened, something shifted. A word was said that changed the atmosphere. A circumstance arose that made continuing feel impossible. A person pulled back without explanation, or a platform that seemed like a divine setup suddenly disappeared, and you found yourself back at the beginning, wondering what you did wrong, wondering if you somehow disqualified yourself from the very thing heaven promised you, wondering if you misheard, wondering if the dream was ever real at all. And the lie you've been living under, the one that has been assigned to your mind since early in your life, sometimes placed there by the words of a parent, a teacher, a pastor, a partner, is this: that the disappointments were proof of your unworthiness, that the pattern of loss was a verdict, that if God truly had something great for you, by now it would have arrived. And since it hasn't, perhaps the promise was never yours. Perhaps you are the exception to the blessing. Perhaps God's goodness has a boundary, and you have somehow found it. But I want to expose that lie at its root right now, because that thought was never yours. It was planted. Every seed of self-rejection that took root in the soil of your disappointment was deliberately sown by something that understood the weight of your assignment before you did. You did not arrive at self-doubt through logic. You arrived there through wounds. And the wound is not a verdict. A wound is evidence that something in you was worth striking. Think about Joseph. Before the palace, before Pharaoh, before the moment where every thread of his broken story wove itself into an unshakable destiny, Joseph sat in a prison for something he did not do. And what's remarkable isn't just that he endured it. What's remarkable is what he did while he was there. He kept interpreting dreams. He kept operating in his gift inside the very place that was designed to make him forget he had one. He didn't wait until conditions were favorable. He didn't wait until someone acknowledged his worth. He didn't wait until the injustice of his imprisonment was addressed before he began serving again. He kept moving in purpose in the middle of pain. And the cupbearer forgot him. And Joseph waited 2 more years in that prison after the one person who could have helped him walked out the door and never looked back. Not because God was silent, but because the right Pharaoh hadn't had the right dream yet. The timing wasn't just about Joseph being ready. It was about the world being positioned to receive what Joseph carried. Read that again and feel how it shifts the entire weight of your waiting. The world had to be positioned to receive what you carry. The people who are supposed to be on the other side of your open door are not there yet. The platforms that are being prepared for your voice are not finished yet. The chapter that requires your testimony is not at the point in history where it needs you yet. And God, who sees the end from the beginning, who holds every timeline in his sovereign hands, who is not bound by the calendars we mark or the clocks we watch, that God is coordinating something on your behalf that is so intricate, so exquisitely timed, that if it had arrived a moment sooner, you would not have been able to fully receive it. And once that clicks, everything shifts. You are not behind. You have not missed your moment. You are being held in position until the people and the platforms and the doors that are meant to receive what you carry are fully aligned. Your delay is not a denial. It is a divine synchronization. But here's the part no one wants to hear. And this is where we have to be honest with each other in a way that goes beyond comfort. Some of what has delayed you isn't spiritual warfare. Some of it is a pattern you've been repeating without realizing it. A way of retreating right before breakthrough. A habit of dimming yourself in rooms where God sent you to shine. A tendency to defer to people who were never given authority over your destiny, simply because they were loud about it. A pattern of making yourself smaller in the very moments where heaven was expecting you to stand the tallest. A rhythm of pulling back from the edge, just when the leap was calling your name most clearly. And this pattern, this quiet, familiar withdrawal, it doesn't feel like fear. That's the thing that makes it so insidious. It feels like humility. It feels like wisdom. It feels like not wanting to be presumptuous. It sounds like phrases you've spoken 100 times. I don't want to get ahead of God. I want to make sure this is really Him. I want to be certain before I move. And those can be genuine, holy instincts, but they can also be the language of fear, dressed in the clothing of faithfulness. They can be the hiding place of a heart that has been hurt so many times it has learned to make peace with staying still rather than risk the devastation of another fall. And if you are honest with yourself, deeply, vulnerably, courageously honest, in that innermost place where only God has access, you already know the difference. You already know whether the pause in your spirit is the restraint of wisdom or the paralysis of fear. You already know whether you are truly waiting on God, or whether you have been using God as a reason to wait on yourself. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share next is the part that breaks the cycle. There is a voice you've been listening to that sounds like caution but carries the frequency of fear. It tells you to wait a little longer, to prepare a little more, to be a little more certain before you move. It tells you that you're not quite ready yet. It shows you every area where you still fall short. It replays every past failure as evidence for why the future should be approached with suspicion. And it sounds reasonable. It sounds responsible. It even sounds spiritual. But it is not the voice of the shepherd. The shepherd's voice calls you forward. It doesn't block you in place with the weight of what hasn't been finished yet. It says, I have already made a way. Now walk. Isaiah 43 carries a word that dismantles the voice of false caution entirely. God says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? The word perceive there isn't passive. It's not a gentle suggestion. It is a demand wrapped in a question. God is asking you, do you have the eyes to see what I'm already doing? Do you have the spiritual sensitivity, the willingness, the courage to look past what has been and recognize what is already in motion? Because the new thing doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It springs up. It moves. It is alive and active and moving right now in dimensions you cannot see with natural eyes. And if you're still focused on the former things, on the failures, on the people who left, on the opportunities that didn't materialize, on the version of yourself that didn't make it, you will miss the new thing entirely while it's happening right in front of you. You will walk past the burning bush because you were still grieving the last fire that burned you. You will miss the angel because you were rehearsing conversations with people who were never meant to be part of your next chapter. This is the cost of backward focus. It isn't just emotional pain. It is prophetic blindness. It is standing in the middle of a miracle and not being able to recognize it because your eyes are still fixed on what was. And this is where the real turning point lives. The someone powerful who is coming toward your life, whether that is a person, a platform, an opportunity, a divine assignment, or a sudden, unexpected opening. They are not coming to fix what's broken in you. They are not arriving as a repairman for your damage. They are coming to connect with what God already built in you. And that distinction changes everything. Because if you believe they're coming to rescue you, you will present yourself as someone who needs saving. You will lead with your lack. You will apologize for your gaps. You will arrive at the appointment with your need rather than your anointing. And the entire dynamic of the encounter will be shaped by the poverty of your self-perception rather than the abundance of what heaven placed inside you. But if you understand that they are coming to align with what God already deposited inside of you, with the gift, the insight, the hard-won wisdom, the unique assignment that only you carry, you will show up differently. You will show up as a vessel, as a carrier, As someone already walking in the authority of their calling, not perfectly, not without trembling, but forward, present, awake to what they are bringing toward you rather than desperately reaching for something to fill a void. This is the shift that most people never make, and it's the one that changes the entire conversation. But here's where it goes even deeper, and this is the layer that most people either rush past or never reach at all. Because reaching it requires a kind of honest reckoning that is uncomfortable in the most necessary way. The powerful person, the divine connection, the major offer that is moving toward your life. It will require something of you that you didn't expect. Not sacrifice in the traditional sense, not more prayer, not more fasting, not more waiting. Those things are good and holy. But what this next season will require goes beneath the surface of spiritual discipline into something more personal, more tender, more threatening to the self you've constructed over years of difficult seasons. It will require you to release a version of yourself that you've been protecting, not your true identity, the one God inscribed in eternity before you drew your first breath, but a smaller, safer, more manageable version. An identity built in the wilderness to help you survive. An armor assembled piece by piece from every rejection, every betrayal, every door that closed in your face. A version of yourself that learned how to need less, expect less, want less, dream in smaller dimensions, because dreaming large had already cost you more than you knew how to pay. And it served you then. It kept you moving when the grief would have paralyzed you. It kept you functional when the wound was still raw. It gave you language for a story that had no satisfying ending yet. But it cannot come with you into what's next. The coat that kept you warm in the desert will suffocate you in the palace. The coping mechanisms that helped you survive the pit will become the very walls that keep you from thriving in the open field that God has prepared. And until you are willing to lay it down, to stand for a moment in the vulnerability of your actual self, without the protective armor of your survival identity, the very thing God is sending toward you will not be able to find the real you, because the real you keeps getting hidden behind the you that learned how to cope. This is one of the most profound and most painful truths of spiritual maturity. We spend years praying to be found, to be seen, to be known and chosen and called. And then when the divine appointment draws near, we show up dressed as someone else. We show up in the persona we built to protect ourselves from the last disappointment. And heaven is calling the name of the person we were before the world told us to make ourselves smaller. Heaven is looking for the original version, the unfiltered, undimmed, fully lit version that existed before the damage was done. And coming up, the one thing beneath all of this that most people avoid because it requires the most courage of all. Think of Moses at the burning bush. Here was a man who had already lived 2 full lives. One as a prince, raised in the house of Pharaoh with every luxury and education and platform that the most powerful civilization on earth could offer, and one as a fugitive, a shepherd in the backside of the desert, tending the flocks of his father-in-law for 40 years. 2 full lives, 2 full identities, both of them, in a sense, stripped away. The prince who murdered a man and had to flee. The shepherd who had almost certainly made peace with the idea that his story was over, that the burning vision of his youth, the sense of calling, the awareness that he was somehow meant for something connected to the suffering of his people, had been extinguished in the ash of his failure. And he was standing on holy ground, being called back into the very thing he had been running from for 40 years. Back toward Egypt, back toward Pharaoh, back toward the identity he had buried. And his response wasn't defiance, it wasn't rebellion. It was something more honest and more painful than either of those. He said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" Not as a theological question about divine sovereignty, not as a calculated political calculation about odds and outcomes. As a wound, as the voice of a man who had been so thoroughly dismantled by failure and exile that he genuinely could no longer see what God saw when he looked at him. He had accepted the exile. He had agreed on some level with the sentence. He had made his peace with the smaller story. And now heaven was tearing that settled conclusion open at the seams. And God's answer was not a list of Moses' qualifications. God did not say, "You are articulate, you are educated, you understand the Egyptian court, you have leadership capacity." God said, "I will be with you." The answer to "Who am I?" was not "You are this, you have that, you've proven yourself here." The answer was, "It doesn't matter who you think you are, it doesn't matter what verdict your worst season handed down. It doesn't matter what conclusions the exile drew about your worth, your readiness, your voice, your right to stand in the presence of the powerful and speak. What matters is who I am. And I am going with you." That word goes so far beyond comfort. It is a complete restructuring of the framework by which we measure ourselves. Moses had been measuring himself against his failure, his age, his isolation, his limitations. And God said, "You have been using the wrong measuring stick. The question is not whether you are sufficient. The question is whether I am sending you." And I am. This is the confrontation you've been avoiding. Not with the enemy, not with the people who hurt you or dismissed you or failed to see what God put inside of you. Those confrontations may matter, but they are not the root. The confrontation that has been waiting for you, quietly, patiently, in the space between every prayer you've prayed and every promise you've claimed, is with your own assessment of yourself, because somewhere along the way you started agreeing with the verdict that your hardest seasons handed down. You took the pain of rejection and turned it into a policy. You took the silence of unanswered prayers and made it into a theological conclusion about your value. You took the words of people who could not see past their own limitations and allowed them to become the lens through which you saw yourself before God. And that agreement, quiet, deeply lodged, disguised as self-awareness and realism and emotional maturity, is the actual wall, not your past, not your pain, not the people who didn't choose you, your agreement with their contusion about you. That is what seals the door. That is what keeps the hand of God from placing into yours what he has been holding in trust for this exact moment. And here is the unexpected thing, the thing that will either land deeply or unseat something in you right now. The thing that God has been waiting for the right moment to say directly to where you are sitting. The powerful one who is coming is not coming despite your broken story. They are coming because of it. What you survived, what you endured, what you lost, and what you learned in the losing, that is the very thing that qualifies you to carry what they're bringing. The scar tissue is the credential. The midnight seasons are the training ground. The chapters you'd most like to remove from your story are the ones that produce the deepest, most irreplaceable wisdom you now carry. God does not send divine appointments to perfect people. He sends them to prepared ones. And preparation doesn't look like a clean record. It doesn't look like a spotless resume or an unblemished history or a life that never veered off the projected path. Preparation looks like a person who has been through the fire enough times to stop being afraid of heat. Preparation looks like someone who has been through enough betrayal to understand the difference between people who are sent and people who are merely passing through. Preparation looks like a heart that has been broken open wide enough to carry something bigger than a defended heart ever could. It looks like someone who has lost enough to no longer be controlled by the fear of loss. Someone who has hit enough walls to stop taking direction from the walls and start looking for the door. It looks like you, right now, exactly as you are, in this season, in this tension, in this holy, difficult, about to break open moment. The offer is real, the person is real, the shift is real. The alignment that heaven has been orchestrating behind the scenes of your life, across timelines you couldn't see, through people you didn't know were being moved into position, through closed doors that were protecting you, even as they were disappointing you. All of it is real, and none of it will land in a heart that still believes it isn't worthy of receiving it. So before this day is over, before you close this and go back to the noise of the world and the demands of a life that doesn't always leave room for the sacred, let this settle into the deepest place inside of you. Let it go past the part of you that processes information and into the part of you that carries faith. Let it reach the part that has been waiting the longest, the part that whispered the first prayer, the part that believed before the evidence came. You were not chosen by accident. The suffering was not a mistake. The delay was not abandonment. The silence was not indifference. And what is moving toward your life right now is not a consolation prize. It is not a lesser version of the dream. It is not what God gives to people who almost made it. It is the appointed thing, the right thing. The thing heaven held back long enough to make sure you'd be able to carry it without dropping it, without shrinking back from it, without diminishing it with a self-concept too small to receive it. Place your hand on your heart and declare this with me. I release every label that was placed on me by people who could not see what God saw. I break agreement with every lie I have believed about my worthiness, my readiness, and my calling. I release the smaller version of myself that I built to survive, and I step into the identity that heaven assigned before I was born. I open my hands to receive what is being sent toward my life. I am not behind. I am not cottoned. I am not disqualified. I am chosen. I am prepared. I am positioned. And I walk forward today knowing that the most powerful encounter of my life is not something I have to earn. It is something I have to be willing to receive. I am ready, and I am open, and it is done. If this message confirms something your spirit has been carrying in silence, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And if you're ready to go deeper into understanding your divine assignment, the link is waiting for you in the first pinned comment below.